Okay, we are alive. Alive. Last time I checked, we're alive, and we're cohabitating in the same temporal space. What's going on, everybody? Robert Phoenix here. Sorry, I'm running late today. I'm trying to put together a lot of materials so that you guys can have some context for where we're at, where we're going, or where we're not going. So I'm going to get into that today, and I'm going to use a few different tools at my disposal. And one of the tools I'm going to be using today, besides astrology, which I almost always use, is I'm going to use the tarot. And I did a tarot reading last night for a situation, and it came out very, very interesting. And I think it really speaks to what's going on. So I'm going to get into that later on in the show. I've also got a bunch of links and some video that I want you to see to understand where we're at and really what's going on. And yesterday was an attempt on my part to sort of keep things at a reasonable level, right? To try to look at this thing from a kind of a more detached but vested in the same way perspective, right? Because anytime something traumatic happens or something weird happens and everybody gets their gets jacked into, right, it's really good not to feed the beast, because you don't want to get into the feed the beast mode. What is the feed the beast mode? Well, it's either you're going to be really, really pissed off and angry, which is feeding the beast, and there's a time for righteous indignation and anger. Don't get me wrong. That's a really healthy expression, in my opinion, something Christians may ought to think about every now and then. And then there is the dropping down into despair, which is the polarity of that, right? So you either get really worked up and get pissed off and angry, and you can't hold that charge forever, by the way. That charge gets dissipated. And when that charge gets dissipated, then where are you? Right? You've kind of released it. Tension, release, tension, release. Dick Algeier was talking about this on his. I really like Dick Algeier, by the way. I'd like to have him as a guest on the show. I think he's really cool. So he was talking about that yesterday, and I agree with him. So that if we get really, really worked up and we're at this pitch, there has to be a time where you come off the pitch, that there's a discharge of the anger, indignation, and rage. For most people, some people are addicted to that. And I remember one time, Dr. Phil had this woman on, and she was always angry. And I'm like, well, this is really interesting. Why is she always angry? Well, there's a lot of reasons why she's always angry. Number one, it helps her stay in control of situations. Number two, when you're angry, guess what happens? Your senses are more acute. They are. They're more acute. You're kind of switched on. You have this kind of, flash of adrenaline happening all the time when you're angry. So when so she was addicted to the adrenaline, and she was addicted to the acuity. And the other thing with anger is that it creates separation. That's what happens with anger, creates separation. If you're not angry, if you're just, peaceful and hanging, there is no separation. So anger brings us into the world of duality, and then non-anger brings us into the world of, well, everything's just okay, and there is no right or wrong or good or bad, or you know what I'm saying? But even that lends itself to a type of complacency. And when that complacency sets in, then guess what happens? People are prime targets for being fatted up like pigs and cows. So there's a dance between that state of alarm with anger and being kind of alert, or dropping down into full-on depression, or just being totally complacent. So yesterday I was trying to strike a balance between those two places, because if you look at the situation, it's pretty fucking depressing. It is pretty fucking depressing. If you really want to get into it, you get really fucking pissed off too. And there's a time for that. Okay, there's a time for it. But yesterday was not that day. It was not that day. And there's still a lot more theoretical information to come through. So we're trying to sort of elongate our response to this thing, right? To elongate it so we have more of a capacity to deal with the information at hand and figure out where we want to be at any point along the spectrum. Now, sometimes crashing despair, sometimes that's the place to be. I'm just telling you. I don't advocate it, but sometimes it's the place to be. Sometimes bottoming out is really maybe not a course of action, but a course of inaction, which leads to something else. I wouldn't promote it as a lifestyle, nor would I promote anger as a lifestyle either. So there's a whole spectrum of potentiality that we can participate in. It's just trying to sort through things and figure out where our approach is going to be, right? In any given moment in time or moving forward. So yesterday for me was a day to kind of elongate the experience and try to have a broader view and a broader perspective so people didn't get hung up and feeling like they were caught in a net. And subsequently, I'll be addressing different things and in different ways. But again, with the idea that we're going to try to get to something that is more, I would use the word imminent, right? Like a truth, something imminent. So that's going to be part of today's show. And I'm going to get into some different kind of material today to try to show you where we're at, give you a big picture perspective, and also some of the minutia and the bullshit that's going on, which I think is important. So we're going to do Gemini Sag today. We're going to go micro. We're going to go macro. Micro, macro. That's part of today's thing. I'm also going to talk about football today. And we'll try to talk about football in a way that's contextual, that actually is a sub-narrative as to what's going on. So let's see. We've got 9:30. I'm going to try to rock this thing for a good hour, get in a lot of information, as much as possible. All right. So let's see what we have here. We got Craig. What's going on, Craig? Chris and Steve, they'll be here tomorrow. I don't know what we're going to talk about. How did Cal Cunningham do, by the way, down there in North Carolina? Let's see. Kestrel's here. Pauletta's here. FUP77. There's PB, Natasha Lloyd, Lils, Lisa Marie, Mark, you're becoming a regular. God bless you. Good to see you. T. Jordan, Lori Seiler. Lori, I'll be talking to you soon. Mary Olmstead. Beth Cummings. Hi, Beth. Joe Dimitri. Dorothy. I'm getting hungry. Victoria V. Let's see. Joe Mommenhouse. There's Jennifer Fitzgerald. Tamara Garth. Hi, Tamara. The lovely and talented Jonas. Darren, my man from the Big Easy. What's going on, brother? Ian Barber, W.C. Ray, Danica Rose, Maury Demare, Kirk Judkins, J.M.P. Love, Kathy Werner Leap. There's Uncle Glenn. Leon Lewis. Leon, you made it on time. I'll get back to you today. Sorry, man. By the time you hit me last night, I was like, phew. I think, what did I do? Did I do 3 readings yesterday? I did 2 readings yesterday. In the show, and man, I was just knackered. Tina Sherman, hi Tina. TC, I'll get back to you today as well. Good to see you. There's Ryan Lapicius. Anybody else knows? There's my man Thor by the door. Laurel Jubin, one of my favorite cosmonauts. Mary Black. Still know the salvation from the fascist transhuman agenda lies in being at home in the light and grace of love and nature. Well put, Mary. Thank you for that. Teresa Blackburn, what's going on, Teresa? Let's see, who else do we have here? Anybody else? Coach K's here. Welsh Roses. Nice to see you, Welsh, in real time. You are the walrus. I like that. Cuckoo choo. Ani is here. Dahlia Shines is here. Man, we got an all-star cast. There's Judy, Eva from Norway, Angela Nelson. We got an all-star cast in chat. Fantastic. Way to go. Way to go. And the 1965 Bandit. Remember Bandit from Johnny Quest? Johnny Quest, they could never make Johnny Quest today. They could never make that show today. And I always thought Race and Dr. Quest were a little light in the pants, if you know what I mean. Although there was a female love interest in there. Like they managed to weave in a female love interest at one time in Johnny Quest. And it was kind of like Race and Race Manning and Dr. Quest were competing over this woman who was a spy. That was quite interesting. It gave a little deeper insight into the nature and character of Race and Dr. Quest's Really, isn't it interesting? I never made this connection before. Like, like Race's last name is Bannon, like Steve Bannon. And what is Steve Bannon known for? Like, like being a racist or whatever, right? So Race Bannon, kind of interesting. I never made that connection. Anyway, Bandit, the little dog. And I think Johnny Quest started off, I think, as a primetime cartoon. They used to have primetime cartoons on network television. Like the Flintstones were a primetime cartoon. Like it would be like watching The Simpsons. Like The Simpsons are a primetime cartoon. So the Flintstones, I think, were probably the first primetime cartoon. And I think the Jetsons were a primetime cartoon too. And maybe Johnny Quest, although maybe Johnny Quest was just Saturday. Anyway, the voice of Johnny Quest, of course, played by Tim Matheson, whose claim to fame was being the lead character in Animal House. The old cartoons are insight into the future. It's scary. Absolutely. Scary good sometimes. Eloise Alfaro, hi there. Welcome. Welcome. Okay, let's do this. I appreciate all the feedback you guys give me on this invocation. Man, I just do this to clear the space. And I try to do it in the most non-denominational way possible, the way that speaks to me. Right? So I just do this to clear the space. That's all I do. All right. And it seems to be pretty helpful. So, if you have a problem with it, tune out. If you want to revise it, do your own thing. This is just how I do it. Okay. So here we go. Dear Blessed and Holy Mother, Father God. That is the Gnostic interpretation, by the way. That's how the Gnostics view the universe, the Mother, Father God. So just a little clarification there. Dear Blessed and Holy Mother, Father God of the great central sun, which is within all of us, which is the universal light through everything, time, space, whatever that thing out there in there is. It's a universal light. Does not deny anybody access, okay? Which is the light of Yeshua Sananda Emmanuel, who I believe is the avatar in flesh, many avatars, but a very significant one. May only the highest and best wisdom and truth information come through this channel at this time. And as a result, we are all blessed and graced by the qualities of intuition, guidance, faith, reflection, repose, action, will, timing, patience, fortitude, plenitude, humor, intelligence, courage, strength, flexibility, pliability, empathy, compassion, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed. And let's get going. All right. A lot to talk about. So I'm going to jump right into this tarot reading that I did last night for the situation. And some of you may or may not be aware that I was a professional tarot card reader for quite a while. And that genesis for me began back in the 90s. It actually really started in the 80s when my first wife gave me my first tarot deck, which was the Explorer deck, which I really loved. It was the James Wantless kind of creative montage. Sort of looking for. It's like like a montage, like the vision board kind of deck, right? I love that deck, and so I became familiar with tarot through that deck, and then it was just like to me it was just like relearning something. Like I already knew it. It was just like I was relearning it and refining it, and then I wound up. I think it was in right around about 93. There was this woman I was hanging out with, and she gave me another deck, and she gave me the Crowley deck. And so I jumped into the Crowley deck, which is different than the Rider-Waite and the other decks that generally represent a variation of the Rider-Waite. And even the Explorer deck is a bit different than the Crowley deck and the Rider-Waite deck. And I know that there's a lot of charge around the Crowley deck, also known as the Thoth deck. I've never had anything like bad happen to me. And I know some people have had to go out and burn this deck. And it's never, I've never had any real negative experience, but I think it's an interesting deck. And the reason why I like it is because it also includes astrological symbolism inside the deck. So there's a number of different ways you can interpret the cards. You can interpret it by the kind of original meaning, but there's also another kind of level that you can interpret them with. So I did a reading last night for the situation, and let me show you what I came up with, and I think it's pretty accurate, if I do say so myself. Okay, so here we go. Now, this is a spread that I use, and it's a kind of a variation of the Celtic Cross. I do not use an indicator card. I got a nice big card. Speaking of card, I got this big fat cardinal right outside my window. Likes to come here and hang out, eat the berries. What's going on? How's it going, man? This guy's lived a good life. You can tell. He's like the king. Anyway, so here we go. Variation of the cross, right? The Celtic cross in some ways, but this is a layout that I use. So this is the foundation. This is where we are coming from. This is where we are. This is where we're headed. This is the process. Potential outcome. This is the challenge, and this is what's hidden from us. Okay, so these are the stations of the cross, and I think it is really apropos. If we go down into the foundation, we have the Nine of Swords, which is cruelty. Now, if you're familiar with the Rider-Waite deck, you know what that image looks like. It's that person, they're sitting up at night. I've lived the Nine of Swords. We've all kind of lived the Nine of Swords. It's sort of the dark night of the soul in some ways. It's that moment where there's this incredible sort of angst and existential dread going on. You can't sleep, right? And it's the last station before you get to the Ten of Swords, which is just absolute and utter collapse and ruin. Now, the swords are mental, so it's a state of mind. And in this position, what's happening is we're seeing this kind of psychological operation. This is a form of torture. This is a form of cruelty, right? They basically created not just a massive speed bump to the so-called democratic process. They've created a sadomasochistic, and more on the sado side experience, collective experience, and they just keep digging the swords in. So part of what this is, it's more than just stealing an election. It's more than that. What it is it's payback. It's torture. It is getting a pound of flesh out of the psyche of the average American. Now, some people, if the swords are going in, somebody's got to be putting the swords in. Now, those people aren't necessarily having the same experience of mental anguish because they're the ones that are drawing blood, right? So this is the foundation of what's going on, and it's not a great foundation. Now, it's not the Ten of Swords. In some ways, the Ten of Swords might even be better, but the Nine of Swords does have the potential for change. And that's where we get into the process. And when I would work with the tarot, I would always tell people that this in the foundation is what's driving the chart. It's like an engine. And the process is the fuel. Okay, so these two cards are connected. We'll get to change. So the bottom line, the foundation is that this is a bloody time, but the blood and the violence and the crime or the indignation is here, right? Swords represent the mind. So we got to get our minds right. That's important. If we're dealing with a collective situation, we got to get our minds right. Now, we've just passed through. Remember, this is in the past now. So we've just passed through the moon. And I think a very fitting card, because what's going on with the moon? Well, we don't know. And this is the moon that is really not the full moon. It is more like the new moon, or could be the balsamic moon, which is dissipative. It's a dark moon. It is a moon that represents mystery. And I've always felt like the moon is very, very much akin to the birth process, or trying to, move through the birth canal and not really knowing where you're going theoretically. Another metaphor I like to use for the moon is, let's say it's a night with a new moon, and you're headed through a forest, and maybe you know what that forest is like during the day, during a period of time where there's sun and you can move through it. But in the new moon, it's a bit more difficult. Even if you know the path, it's difficult. So you have to feel your way through things. And this is a card that's also connected very much to deception. Crowley likes to use the twin pillars throughout the deck. You'll also see the twin pillars in the Chariot. You'll also see the twin pillars. That's not Chariot. That's the Rider-Waite. You'll see the twin pillars certainly in the Lovers deck as well. The twin pillars also come through in the Priestess, in Rider-Waite. You won't see that here as much in the Crowley deck, but you'll see it here in the Thoth deck. So this is an interesting. So we've gone through this lunar phase. So we're coming through this period of darkness and mystery and what's really going on. Lunacy. It's not like the light of the sun where everything is illuminated. So this sets the stage in a lot of ways for the journey through the rest of the reading. Now here we are, Saturn in this is Saturn in Pisces, 8 of Cups, indolence. So 8, if you have Masaki's in the chat, he'll tell you 8 is a power number. It is a power number, but here power is inverted. This is just, to me, indolence is very much connected to and related to despair. This is like Alex Jones getting shit-faced on election night. This is the 8 of Cups. It is the draw to indulge in emotional excess, right? Not only that, but Saturn at the top here represents hierarchies. It represents the system that we're in. And in Pisces, what we're seeing here is, or not seeing, is what's going on behind the scenes. There's not a lot of clarity. There's a lot of deception. And there's a lot of like indolent behavior. And the indolent behavior, I think, could be very much connected to the civil servants and the people that are working at these police. They're being indolent. They're being, fuck you. We're gonna steal this fucking election. Fuck you. And by the way, these people have been put in place. Make no mistake. The people that are running the places where they're tabulating, the polling station, they've been put in place. The election officials in a particular station or in a particular area, they've been put in place, especially inside of democratic states. So their actions are filled with indolence, right? They're indolent. And they're saying, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. We're not going to let you win. So that's like the micro. The macro is that there is a temptation to descend into thoughts and emotions and behaviors that are toxic. They're toxic. So this is kind of where we are now, like collectively. We're trying to get through and move through this kind of brackish, dark kind of emotional phase. And it's interesting because on the other side here, we have the 9 of Discs, which really took me by surprise. And if you look at the Rider-Waite deck, it's the card of wish fulfillment. You have the beauty, this kind of beautiful goddess figure who is bountiful and bestowing blessings upon the people, which is interesting. Here, it's a bit different. Again, we have Saturn, right? We have Saturn at the top, but it's slightly, of all the cards in the Crowley deck, this one to me sort of represents the Chokmah, or the path of the Kabbalah. I'm not a Kabbalah guy, but you can see the stations of the Kabbalah in there. But this has to do with gain, financial and monetary gain. So the situation improves, right? We're headed towards an improvement of the situation. But it also represents money. Who stands to gain from what we're going through right now? And one of the things I wanted to talk about, but I didn't get to yesterday, was the whole allocation and appropriation of funds that came through BLM and went to Share Blue. Huge amounts of money, like huge amounts of money. Like they being the Democrats and the Biden campaign, they were able to navigate and short circuit and do end around with campaign contributions by having all this BLM money go through Share Blue and eventually wind up in the Biden campaign coffers. And what do you think? Where do you think that money is going now? It's going to lawyers. It's going to people who have said, hey, fuck you. You're not going to get away with this. That's where a lot of that money is going. So it looked like on the surface, they were like, oh, BLM, we love you. We love you. We support the cause. And really what they were doing is that they knew that they were in an internecine agreement with where that money was going, how it was going to be used at some level, and on the back end, how they would be at some point in time in the future rewarded for their generosity. No good deed goes unpunished, theoretically, right? Yeah, right. So there's money changing hands here. There's financial transactions in the future. And this is the most promising card we've seen so far, because it generally tends to be in the Rider-Waite deck a bit of a conclusion here. And it's a conclusion, or it's a transformation. Not conclusion. No, in the Rider-Waite deck, it is a blessing. But we see here, we're moving from 8 to 9, right? So it's a state change. We're going up one octave. We're also changing the nature of 9 in the foundational position. So we have a state change here, which is good. And that reflects to the 2 of discs, which represents the card known as change. So this is an interesting card. And in the Rider-Waite deck, it's kind of the apprentice. I've always seen that figure as the apprentice, playing with this concept of balance and infinity. So this is a card that is really temporal. It means things are in motion. Things are in motion. They're not static. Something is trying to be worked out. Some balance is trying to be achieved here, or at least resolved. Okay. So we are in a state of change. We're in a state of flux. And a lot of it has to do with our physical reality. So when you think about how to deal with this situation, right, you want to try to come into some level of balance physically. Make sure you get enough sleep, make sure you get enough, good food, good water, whatever you need, right? You got to stay in balance. You've got to be able to, go with the changes, or at least interact with this potential of change. Now, here is where it gets tricky and slightly a bit troubling. With the Hanged Man, there's no real resolution. We have some resolution here. Things do change, and it feels like there is this, potential for gain, for assets or resources that, for all intents and purposes, look very positive. But the outcome itself still seems undecided. So let's play the vote game. We'll play the vote game here. So let's say they figure out that, guess what? These votes and everything that's gone on with these states and what they were doing with the votes, that it gets overturned in some ways. That Trump winds up gaining more votes than they took away, like, what's going on in Arizona, which is bizarre. I'm going to show you some stuff. And somehow it comes into this more of an alignment. Like, oh, now we're seeing more of the real picture. But it doesn't necessarily resolve itself. Because when the Hanged Man appears, there is the only resolution that occurs to the Hanged Man is surrender. To be able to, it's still, everything is in suspension. So even though we have some temporary resolution here, the outcome is suspension. And, it's one of those cards where there was a time in my life, man, it kept showing up in my deck, in my spreads all the time. And it felt like there was a period of time in my life where that's where I was. And it was a long period of time. And I just had to hang out with it. For whatever reason, it was like this was my, fate, my phase of purgatory. You couldn't really change it. And the more that you try to change it, the more that you get caught up and hung up in the noose on the foot tightens, and you're really strung up even harder and more intensely. So the whole idea of the Hangman, which is ruled by Pisces, surrender. Right? The outcome here is to surrender and to let go. Now, what's interesting is these two figures that are on either side. Now, the Crowley deck uses there's queens, there's no kings, but there are knights, and there are princesses as well as princes, which is quite different than some of the other decks. So here we have the Princess of Cups. Now, this is in the area that is the challenge, right? So this is an emotional card. The challenge is, how do we deal with our emotions? Here we go. Eight of Cups, indolence. This, to me, the Princess of Cups is, and this is not meant to demean teenage women around the planet, but to me, this feels like the card of a young woman who's really emotional and has to get things out, right? Has to get things out. So that's the challenge, is how do we deal with these emotions? Some of which are very raw, and some of which really cut to a lot of the conditions that we experience when we're an adolescent. Because when you're an adolescent, there's at times there can be real clarity, which is a shame, because it feels like the forces in this world are primed to hijack that clarity in a lot of ways. They want to redirect it and march you into the Sunrise Project or Sunrise Movement, where the hell that thing is. Right, so this is the challenge. How do we express ourselves? How can we feel vulnerable and get through a time of high emotionality? And it's not just people that are kind of pissed off about this process, but I'm going to be inclusive here. Like the so-called left and the right, or the conservatives, the progressives. There's a highly charged degree of emotion, and it is not the sole domain of any one group. Okay, this is important. So the challenge is, how do we go through this and express our emotions in a kind of an authentic way, but not going off the rails, not descending into the Eight of Cups. How do we do that? I think is important. I think it's quite important. Now, on the other side, which is what's hidden from us, is a very different card. It's similar in the sense that it is a princess, but this is the Princess of Wands. And the energy is way different. This is like taking the tiger by the tail. And this is what's hidden from us with this. And for me, the princesses and the princes, they're all evolving energies. Think of them as kind of mutable agents in the chart. They're evolving. They're learning. They're growing through kind of certain phases and aspects. So what's hidden from us is, how do we take control of the situation? Now, this is a very different card in that the wands are fire. This is about fire. How do we, how are we stewards of our own fire, our own passion, our own intensity? And maybe with the macro picture with the election and the results, this might play a role as well. But we're dealing with two very, very different types of expression here, and both of them are transitory, mutable, and learning. One can descend into indolence, right? It could experience some kind of purgation, maybe a little catharsis. But once that's done, or once that's kind of managed, right, the other side of this and what's hidden is taking the tiger by the tail. And in a lot of ways, it kind of like feels like kind of where I was yesterday. That I wasn't down in my cups, but yesterday was a really highly charged and emotional situation. I mean, when we did the live stream on election night, it was an interesting sort of journey, because early on, you had the Young Turks flipping out, and it was really looking like Trump was going to fucking kick Biden's ass. That's what it was really looking like. And then as the night went on, things began to shift. And you could see that Steve Bannon was starting to get a bit uneasy. Right? But it was still like, okay, there are numbers here that are really good. But then you wake up the next day and it's like, the WTF moment. Like, what the fuck is going on here? There are shenanigans going. So that part in and of itself is tricky to deal with, because you're coming out of sleep, if you could sleep, and you wake up and this is your reality now. Right? You're waking up into that reality. That's not an easy reality to wake up to. It's not like you were seeing that happen in real time. It's like you wake up into, if you're on one side, you wake up into a nightmare. If you're on the other side, oh my God, this is a dream come true, right? Two of discs, trying to find balance there. But I see that as a prime psychological operation that is connected with this idea of cruelty. It's like, hey, fuck you. You're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to see a whole different world. You're not going to like it. You are not going to like it. So to me, this is the cards in this deck, in this spread, rather, the ones that I think are the most important are the Nine of Discs, the Hanged Man, and ultimately the Princess of Wands, and taking the tiger by the tail. Now, control is kind of an illusion in some ways, but you can't take possession of your faculties. You can't take possession of your energy, and you can't take possession of your sovereign right to exist and to be and express. And that's what we should always be doing, regardless of any electoral outcome or result. So we got a ways to go here. And this, to me, is the most interesting outcome, the Hanged Man. In some ways, it is the most spiritual, the most profound, and the most evolved card in the major arcana, and also one of the most difficult. Right? This, to me, it leads to a resurrection. This is Odin on the Yggdrasil, or this is the idea of being crucified or hung up. And you are released. The only time you're released is when you surrender. And the other thing with the Hanged Man that I experienced during phases where it was really prevalent in my life was I tried to get out of my way and help other people. If I was suffering for whatever reason, that the easiest or best way for me to deal with my suffering was to get out of my suffering by helping somebody else in the most selfless way that I think I could do, because there was a transaction going on there that I think was important and is important. So remember that too, as we move through this phase, that if you feel stuck or you feel hung up, if the collective energies are really keeping you in this uncomfortable stasis, see what you can do to attend to somebody else's suffering. It doesn't have to be major, but just be mindful of that. It's a good way to deal with the kind of the sort of the Bardo state of the Hanged Man. Okay? All right. So I'm not gonna go into this too much more. I think I've explained it pretty well. And of course, you'll be able to go back and listen to this at the same time. Okay. So where are we? Let's see. It's all about the balance. What did Annie say? It's okay. Our wrenches have troll sniper technology. You guys got fucking laser sights. You got laser sights on your wrenches. Let's see. I never knew till now that trolls have a sense of humor. Well, that's good. We welcome humor. We welcome humor. Look, one of these days, I swear to God, I'm going to win over a troll. I know that. One of these trolls is going to come in here one of these days. Man, fuck him. I'm going to fuck his shit up, right? And they're going to listen. They're going to hang out. They're going to experience a little Chatlandia magic. And guess what's going to happen? Something's going to change. Something will change. Now, I'm not here to change a troll. You can be a troll. Yeah, that's fine. Right? Be a constructive troll, though. Come on. Come on. Be a constructive troll. Up your game. Up your troll magic a little bit. Right? Troll conversion therapy. Yeah. Troll spray on sale today. Great advice. So very true. Help others. Yeah. I mean, that's the best way to deal with the hangman. And by the way, you want to avoid any kind of, see that to me, that reading has a lot to do with lucidity and staying away from anything that's going to take you out of the moment. You know, drugs, drink, pot, whatever. Right? Try to stay in the present, especially with the hangman. Really important. Hey, Anna E, nice to see you. You only change one that's not on a payroll. You never know. You never know. Even ones on a payroll. Even ones on a payroll might come in and go, man, why, that guy said something. I can't get that thing out of my head. What the fuck? You know, I'm a virus. I'm a virus. We're all viral, aren't we? Let's see. What else do we have? In 2016, I stated that Trump was a troll. Oh yeah, Trump is a master troll. That's what he's using Twitter for. And you know, you can agree or disagree or like or dislike Trump. You know, I think his use of Twitter at times was a bit of a bludgeon. There were times where it was useful, and you know, and it became such a bludgeon. He can't even get his fucking tweets on Twitter now, which is, and I don't care whether it's Trump or not. I mean, that shouldn't be a prerequisite. The guy's the president, for Christ's sakes, right? I mean, he's the president. So, and again, if somehow Sleepy Joe becomes president, you know, his tweets should be on Twitter too. They should. Although I'm not sure how much people will read his tweets or read Twitter after that point. It'll be pretty much a closed loop. But yeah, I mean, that thing is just unconscionable, what Jack Dorsey did. But the problem with this is that the reason why the election is in such a state of flux is because certain things have not happened prior to the election. Like, there are people inside of that system, you know, the system that's been essentially corrupting and stealing the election. It's not something that's new. I mean, it's been going on for a long time. The Bush family threw what? At least one, probably two. I think they threw two elections. I think they threw the first one in Florida, of course, the Chad moment. I was so not into politics then. Oh my God. I was like, please, I just can't deal with this shit. I can't deal with both of these clowns. So when all that happened, I just completely tuned out. I was not into it at all. But I think they stole that election. So it was in his home state, his brother's home state, right? Then you move forward, and I really feel like John Kerry beat George Bush. Nobody really liked George Bush. He was unlikable, although Fox loved him. Jesus Christ. They loved him. He wasn't likable at all. And so what did they do? They had a skull and bones running mate go up against him, and John Kerry, who really was polling very poorly. You know, he was sort of the Joe Biden of that experience, of that time. And it was all, you know, with the idea that when the smoke cleared and all the voter irregularities were kind of floating around, John Kerry just walk away. And that's exactly what he did. And of course, it didn't hurt to have Ralph Nader in the mix to drain a few votes. Now, did it? The old third party trick. So, nobody really cried about that. Nobody really cried about that. I did. I thought it was bullshit. And I don't even like John Kerry. But I knew that election was rigged and stolen. So they had rigged 2 elections in a row. Snatched them. And they knew they couldn't do a third. And that's where Obama comes in. They didn't have to rig that election. They did not have to rig that election. Obama was prime time, baby. He was ready to go. Hardly any voting record, not much of a history, at least if you weren't paying attention. Charming, articulate, black, and America's going to vote their conscience. He's talking about hope and change. It's like, let's go. We had 8 years of Bush. Oh my God, we're ready. We're ready for something new. And you're saying all the right things. I mean, for crying out loud, he said he was a constitutional lawyer. I'm not sure which constitution he's a lawyer for, but that's what he said. So everybody's like, okay, that was easy. Like Barack Obama, slam dunk. They don't have to do anything except, run John McCain against him. Wow, great candidate. Great fucking candidate. Not. And even when the financial crisis was happening, John McCain wanted to suspend his campaign. Oh, let's pump the brakes on the election. That was not a good look for McCain. Obama, steady as she goes, right? So didn't have to throw that one. Romney, Obama, I wouldn't be surprised if Romney won. I would not be surprised if he won. But, he doesn't give a shit. Again, he'll walk away. He's got shitloads of money. Who knows? Maybe there was a deal on the side. But again, not somebody you really want to vote for. My God. Terrible. The guy that I liked in the first election, of course, was Ron Paul. The media gave Ron Paul absolutely zero airtime. They gave Andrew Yang, they gave fucking Marianne Williamson more airtime than Ron Paul, frankly, because they didn't want his ideas circulating. By the time the second election rolled around, I was kind of done with Ron Paul. I didn't like how he handled the first election. But I think the results in that election were rigged. Again, and I don't like Romney. I don't want Romney as president, but I think they were rigged. So then we get into the next election, and Trump and Hillary. And I think that there were some discrepancies there. They didn't come out because I think Trump had a pretty big lead. So they couldn't really kind of go to the mat on him inside of the electoral process. But I do think that there were enough discrepancies so that there was that period of time between him being, really looked like he was going to be president, but it took till 3 a.m. I think there was some negotiating going on at that point in time. And I think deals were being made. Now we're looking at another rig. So it's nothing new. Like, this is nothing new, folks. It happens. The problem with this is that in this time, in the continuum of this time, you have to look at Corona, we have to look at George Floyd. I mean, all these things, especially the George Floyd stuff, and how things were allowed to just completely get out of control. What we're seeing now is a continuation of that. And they should have pumped the brakes really hard on that shit early on. Really early on, hard early on. Or because if they did, we wouldn't be going through this maelstrom, this confusion, which again, a lot of it is intentional. It's intentional. It's cruelty, and it's to get you to feel down in your cups. All right, so I wanted to have a sense as to where we are now, and I'm going to bring in some astrology. So this is sort of the big picture effect, and this is the chart of the United States. I am using the 4th of July chart, and I am using the Sibley chart. And the one thing that you want to pay attention to is down here. This is the Pluto return of the United States. And right now, Pluto is, 22? It's at 22 Capricorn. So when this thing went down, right, when they signed their autograph to that piece of paper, again, theoretically, Pluto's at 27 Capricorn. So it hasn't been in this sign and near this degree since 1776. So this country has gone through an entire Pluto cycle, and it will fulfill itself in 2023. And then 2024, as we hit the next major eclipse, we will break through the Pluto return. The two are pretty much synced up and synonymous. So this is the end of a certain chapter of this country, okay? It's the end of a certain chapter of this country. But just as there was the end of a certain chapter of colonial control, again, we'll just kind of go with the narrative, right? There was something new that happened, and that was when Pluto moves into Aquarius, and we're talking in the right around 1780, roughly 1780. That's a new time. It's a new time. It's a new era. It's a new potentiality. You know, this is where they're living and moving into their version of the Aquarian age. And they kind of knew that. These are all acolytes of Sir Francis Bacon for the most part. And they're wanting to create the new Atlantis, which is what one of Bacon's tracks was. So timing is everything here. And we will get into that period, and we will get into that phase, and that'll be in 2025. But for now, we are literally in another revolutionary kind of scenario. In this scenario, the sort of the oligarchy, or the forces of power that were represented by King George in England, have now become Donald Trump, the right, and the Republican Party, in what we would call the status quo. That's what's happened. And the new sort of revolutionaries, and you can even look at the language that Kamala Harris uses when she talks about in Biden. They've all been copying this kind of revolutionary, democratic language and concepts, but they're using them in particular word magic. They're kind of inverting really the meaning of them and applying them. So it's sort of a very, Saul Alinsky talks about this, and he talks about using one's principles, like using a principle against a person and a principle that they adhere to. So, for instance, if you wanted to attack a Christian, you would put them on blast, and you would have to kind of make them deal with the inequity of their piety. That's because nobody can ever live up to that stuff. We're all human. We all make mistakes. So there's no way you could kind of live up with that. So here it's the same thing. They're like taking these ideological sort of precepts that are very quote unquote American or quote unquote democratic republic, and they're adopting them and they're using them against the people who believe in these things. But that was kind of their messaging. We're going to invert. We're going to use the language. We're going to use the concepts. We're going to invert and subvert what they mean, and that's what they've been doing. But it's false. It's false. On the other hand, you have Trump who's been doing the same thing for a while now, whether you like it or not. So they said, okay, well, we're gonna grab that. We're gonna have our own version of that. What's interesting, and I'll tell you, I never really paid attention to this until now, is that the South Node for the U.S. is right here, and it's in Aquarius. It's in Aquarius. So Saturn is going to transit over the South Node here in 4 months, roughly. That's going to be interesting. And this is also the challenges that I think are inherent in starting something with an ideal. I think this is part of it, this South Node. And it also has to deal with things like media and advertising, mass media, alternative media, the mainstream media, internet media, all South Node Aquarius. It's interesting. And I'm wondering with this Saturn transit if there will be more limitations that'll come about as a result of that. Probably. Let's hope there are limitations that we could all live with versus limitations that are a lot more limiting than what we're experiencing now. The true node here is in Leo, which has to do with heart and courage and creativity. Right? That this is sort of the pulse, right? This is the pulsing heart of the country right here, true node in Leo. And when we think of that, we think of things like heroes, actors. This is why I think these figures, these kind of archetypal figures, play a role in how how messages are distributed and disseminated. It's kind of part of the story. This kind of Leo piece, right? So we are now in a revolution. Okay, we're in a revolution. We are in a revolution, and we are in the throes of a Bolshevik takeover. And I've been saying that for a while. When 2017 hit, it was the 100th year anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. And in 1920, it was the beginning of the 100-year march. And the 100-year march was a century of moving towards a communist/socialist dominated and oriented world. And that's what we're in. And we've been talking about this for a while. And it's knocking on the door right now. We are so close. We are so fucking close to being flipped into a very different kind of governance. I don't have a problem with different. I don't have a problem with change. But it's got to be change that I think we can believe in. It's got to be change that promotes equality and not equity. Kamala Harris, interesting character. Again, work magic. She has on her Twitter page, she says, every vote must count, right? Or every vote must be counted. Every vote must be counted. What does she really mean by that? What is she really saying? That every vote must be counted. She's not saying that every vote must be counted, meaning that every vote has to matter. It doesn't matter whether the vote is illegal. Every vote must be counted. She's not saying every legitimate vote or every valid vote or every authorized vote must be counted. She's saying every vote must be counted. That's what she's saying. It has nothing to do with tabulation and math. It has to do with a value. Right? It's not an arithmetic. It's not a mathematical value. Right? It is a political value. Right? It is a ideological value. That's what she's saying. Every vote must be counted. Every vote must be counted. Meaning it doesn't matter what the fuck the vote is. You got to count it. You can't disqualify the vote. That's what she's saying. She's not saying that, hey, we got to count all the votes and they've all got to be real and valid votes. That's not what she's saying at all. They can be bullshit, lies, and pieces of paper, but you got to count them. That's the word magic that these people indulge in. Just follow it, look at it, deconstruct it, pull it apart. A lot of foreigners are saying America must not fall. Well, not just foreigners. Tucker Carlson and Victor Davis Hanson. And Victor Davis Hanson's an interesting character. He's a smart guy. He teaches at Stanford. The Hoover Institute think tank, right? A lot of very interesting people in the Hoover Institute. Anthony Sutton was there, but he basically left the reservation, which was great. But Victor David Hanson has something really, I think, important to say. And that if you look at how this thing is broken down in terms of distribution of power, if you look at Biden and sort of how this kind of assemblage of power has kind of formed around Biden and Harris, it's the tech companies, the tech oligarchs, the media, and guess who else? The banks. Apparently, Mitch McConnell, who I'm not a fan of, I'm more of a fan of him, which is not saying much, than Lady G, Lindsey Graham. Please, come on. That guy's worthless. Anyway, apparently Mitch McConnell was threatened by one of his banks, right? It was like, we're not going to do business with you. Like, that's what's happening now. You have commerce, you have tech, and you have media, and they're all colluding, right? This is who is on the side of the left. This is important to know. And then basically what Victor Davis Hanson said is that who did Trump have? He had the people, and he had talk radio. Like, this is how this thing is broken down now. This is where we're at, and this is what we're up against. It's not just Joe Biden. It's not just Kamala Harris. And by the way, communism and socialism, they're just tools. They're just tools for regime change. That's all they are. That's all they are. That's all they've ever been. Tools for regime change and the reallocation of assets and power. That's it. Period. End story. So we need to be able to buy some time, and if we do want to create something different and new, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay if it pits people against one another and somebody has to suffer along the way. And I'm trying to remain neutral, but what I saw with Trump over the last 6 months was you had the Black African American community. Man, they went out there like Trump was flipping them, especially Black males. He was flipping them, right? The Latino community, Trump was flipping them. And the Democrats and the progressives have always been able to lean on that community. I don't think they've ever really been able to capture like the vote and the psyche of the Black male. That's my sense. But they've always leaned into the Latin American community. And in this election, they began to lose them. And I think that in and of itself is a reason why they have really accelerated this thing. They don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose that part of the electorate that they've always depended upon, right? I think it's too late for them, by the way. I think they've lost them. They've lost them. Okay, so a couple of things I want to go through. I want to talk a bit about football because there's some interesting things going on with football right now. And it kind of gives me a sense as to where things are going and what we might be able to expect over the course of the next couple of months. So indulge me while I take you to profootball.com. And this is a site that's run by this guy, Mike Garofalo, who's a total leftist. I don't like him at all. He's terrible. Anyway, I'm just going to go through a quick thing here. So here we go. Now, the 49ers and the Packers, this is an interesting game. And the reason why it's interesting is because you got a bunch of football players that are testing positive, right? So now we have A.J. Dillon, who tested positive, will not play. Now, these guys, Jamal Williams and Kamal Martin, they're not going to play either, even though they didn't test positive. They are high-risk, close contacts of Dillon. So what is this doing? It's getting people entrained into the idea that if you have had a connection with A.J. Dillon, guess what? You're on the sidelines, brother. Right? They're getting people inculcated into this idea of contact connection and contact tracing. Same deal here. Kendrick Bourne out because of a positive test. What the fuck does a positive test mean anyway? Left tackle Trent Williams, wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, and wide receiver Deebo Samuel were placed on the reserve COVID-19 list as close contacts. This has been going on, and this has been the messaging that I've been seeing again and again and again. They're not talking about somebody's strained hamstring or their upper ankle injury. They're not talking about any of this stuff. What they're talking about and have been talking about is coronavirus. The Houston Texans will work remotely on Thursday after linebacker Jacob Martin tested positive for COVID-19. So they got to shut down their facility. So they're keeping this thing alive, and they're keeping it alive through pro sports. Now, here we go now. Look at this. Broncos set to practice Thursday after no new positive COVID-19 tests. Right? So how many people have actually died here? Big zero, big fat zero. But this is what they're doing. Now, the reason they're doing this is not just to entrain people into the idea of contact tracing. No, that's not it. I think that because the other thing that they're doing is they're talking about a 16-game playoff schedule. A 16-game playoff schedule. Why is that? Why are they talking about that? Well, number one, they're trying to factor in whether or not the NFL will be able to have a legitimately full season. Just like the NBA did not have a legitimate full season. And they're looking at a way to control the playoff structure in a lot of ways. In 16 games, 16 teams, well, it makes it a lot more interesting, right? On some level for people. Like if your team is a shitty team, guess what? You're going to get in the playoffs. So, but they're also factoring, I think, this idea of a second wave. And you can just see them kind of, sort of bring these ghosts up, bring these phantasms of the coronavirus up. It's happening. So there's something going on with the NFL, and it's important. I'm paying attention to it because I think they're telegraphing where they want to go next and what's coming. Okay, got that out of the way. All right. So I want to get into some of the numbers. And there are two things that I want to show and share, which show you really the illegitimacy of what's happening, with this staged election. So what I want to bring in here is this is from James Woods' Twitter feed. I'm not a huge James Woods fan. I know a lot of people really like the guy. He's okay. He's all right. Smart guy. He's got like a 180 IQ or something like that. But this is what came up here. I think he retweeted this. So basically what you're saying is that they have more votes than they do registered voters. And this is the case across the board. Across the board. Where do they get those voters from? Well, certain states will say, well, we don't need to have ID. Right? We don't need to have ID. Well, you don't need an ID. That's what they'll say. Well, these are votes where people, they didn't have an ID. We don't require that. Okay. But it just so happens that every single vote is for, what's his name? Sleepy Joe, right? So, I mean, clearly there are improprieties across the board. And, what is it? North Carolina, well, we may not be able to get to this for another 2 weeks, right? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to basically change the nature of the vote in reality, and all that money from Share Blue is just getting spread around, right? So people they will comply. They'll comply. But it's clear the math doesn't work. It does not work at all. Doesn't work. Not only does the math not work, but I'll show you what else doesn't work. Are postal carriers. And Joel, if you're listening, Mike, if you're listening, this is not an indictment of either one of you. But here we go. Michigan USPS whistleblower claims late ballots received backdated postmarks. So that means that if you voted for Trump and you got a backdated postmark, guess what? Doesn't count. They backdated postmarks. These motherfuckers are so cagey, man. So this is what's going on. And no matter what happens after this election, Americans will never be able to trust another election again, ever. Ever. It doesn't matter who's president. It won't matter who's president at all, whether it's Trump or Biden or Harris or Pence. It doesn't matter who's going to be president. How can we ever go through a process like this again? Now some of the Senate races are held up. I mean, the whole thing is just complete and utter bullshit. It's being thrown out there. Remember the Nine of Swords, like cruelty. You're being punished. It's a form of punishment. It's a form of punishment. They're going to make you pay. They're going to make you pay every fucking step of the way. Every step of the way. And I will tell you why Trump is important. Because if we have any chance whatsoever, any chance to not be essentially herded into the fourth industrial revolution, is going to be with Trump, at least on the surface. Maybe if Biden and Harris get in, the stirring and the awakening that's gone on with people might be enough to carry the momentum, and I won't discount that. But I certainly would rather take my chances with a wild card, even though there's plenty to be, how do I say this, at times quite suspicious about the methodology of Trump and some of the people around him. Okay, he's not surrounded by always the best people. Trust me on this. He's not. And I'm not sure what to do with that. And I don't think he always makes the best decisions either. So I'm not, but I'd rather take my chance with a wild card. And please, can we disabuse ourselves of the idea that anybody is fucking clean? Nobody is clean. None of them are clean. These are all families and syndicates that are into power. Please open your eyes to that. Nobody's clean. They're not. The best that you could hope for is some kind of, how would I say this, greater representation on some level, right? Maybe the aperture is a little bit wider with one person versus the other. I've told this story before. Pablo Escobar was one of the world's biggest drug dealers. And if there was somebody who wanted to, hone in on his turf, Pablo Escobar had no problem killing people to make sure that his cocaine distribution network would remain intact. Pablo Escobar also treated the people of Colombia better than the Colombian government. He built shit for him. He made things for him. He spread his money around. And the government of Colombia didn't like. In fact, Pablo Escobar even ran for public office. I think he won. That was his idea. He's like, I'm going to get in and I'm going to run the fucking country. And that way I'll be safe. Right? It's not a bad idea. That's what the Bush family did. So it wasn't just the fact that he was, a bad dude and killing people, although, that has its own set of consequences. It's the fact that the government of Colombia didn't like him. He was doing in some ways a better job than they were. And the Bush family certainly didn't like him because he was infringing upon their family business. You see how that works? And it's kind of a microcosm of the game. And I'm not endorsing it, but this is the planet we live on. This is the planet we live on, and it's always been this way. Sometimes more and sometimes less. But please, let's just wake up to that. And nobody's going to come around. And I get a lot of emails telling me that, Trump is the Antichrist, and Trump is this, and Trump is that, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, fine. At some point, guess what? If this happens, you won't have to deal with Donald Trump and his SRA servants, right? You won't have to. You get to deal with Biden and Harris, and you get to move on. You'll get to move on, and you get to deal with something else. You get to deal with a different syndicate. You get to deal with a different kind of version of the pincer effect. Well, we give you this version of reality or this version of reality, and they're both being offered up by essentially the same architects. A little bit different model, same architects. So you get to deal with that. I'll tell you what you don't get to deal with, though, is you're not going to be able to or have to deal with a certain person. And who are you not going to have to deal with? Well, if you're in Kansas, you won't have to deal with Barbara Bollier. Now, who is Barbara Bollier? To me, Barbara Bollier is in some ways the face. Dr. Barbara Bollier. She was a Kansas state senator for the state inside of the House there. And now she's running for the actual state senator position. And let me show you just how clueless these politicians really are. Watch this. You will be amazed. You'll be absolutely amazed when I show you this. This will tell you kind of where the state of affairs are and what we're dealing with these people. Remember now, this is a PhD. This is a doctor. She prides herself on her mind. In fact, her one of her campaign symbols is a fucking DNA strand. All right, so check this out. Watch this. This is a call-in interview with her. Here we go. Have a listen.
Thank you so much, Christy. And we had one submitted by Joanne that wanted to know your position on the Patriot Act.
I haven't read it yet, Joanne, specifically. So tell me what specifically you want to know about that.
My concern is that the extraordinary powers that were given to the executive branch under that and perhaps they need to be reviewed and go ahead then, Barbara.
I think what you're talking about is the ability to impose tariffs, et cetera, unilaterally. Yes, I'm very, very opposed to that. It has to be re-examined. Must be, because that just isn't something that should happen unilaterally. I understand why it went into place when it did, but it needs to be reevaluated, and I don't think one individual should just have the ability to just pass something like that unilaterally. That's why we have a Senate and a House, and I would work very hard to change that. It needs to happen. I forgot that's what it was called as part of. I apologize, but I do know about it.
Well, at least you've worked very hard to change that. Unlike some people who have not worked very hard to change that. So bless your heart, Dr. Barbara Bollier. Dr. Barbara Bollier? Dr. Barbara Bollier? This woman is
Thank you so much.
This woman is a little confusing, I have to say. It's a little confusing. And I don't know, man. I'm seeing a little bit of a mustache there. Am I hallucinating? There's a little bit of a mustache there. I mean, his face is looking pretty yang. Pretty yang. But the voice sounding pretty yin. Listen to the voice.
So much, Christy. And we had one submitted by Joanne that wanted to know your position on the Patriot Act.
I haven't read it yet, Joanne.
What the fuck is this? Like two sets of eyebrows here? What is going on there? And it's like, make up your mind. You go in here, you go in here. I haven't read it yet. She hasn't read the Patriot Act yet. Jesus Christ. Where do they find these people? Now she laughs. Thinks it's a great joke, great fun. Specifically, just what do you want to know about it?
So tell me what specifically you want to know about that.
My concern is that the extraordinary powers that were given to the executive branch under that.
Now this person's like, I get it. And she jumps right in. And first of all, she's just displaying her utter ignorance at not knowing what the fucking Patriot Act is. And then she jumps in and then she makes up a completely different narrative and tries to sound really confident. And it goes from bad to worse.
And perhaps they need to be reviewed and go ahead then, Barbara.
I think what you're talking about is the ability to impose tariffs.
There's nothing in the Patriot Act that has to do with tariffs. Sorry. This would have been a prime opportunity. A prime opportunity with her saying the Patriot Act. Oh my God! I tell you what, I'm going to commit a cardinal sin, a political cardinal sin, and I'm going to tell you right now, I am not I am not informed enough about the Patriot Act to give you an informed answer. Like, that would have been honest. That would have been an honest answer. And she could have said, well, what do you think about the Patriot Act? Boom, right? And this woman gets to tell her what she thinks. And then she could say, wow, yeah, well, that's interesting. Thank you for your perspective. Let me speak to that. But instead, she goes off in some fucking half-cocked idea that it's about tariffs. This is how politics, it has descended into. People that don't know jack shit. She's got a certification and degree. Who knows what kind of doctor she is. She doesn't have a PhD like Joe Biden, who basically did a dissertation on retention rates at community college, right? So who knows I don't know I don't really have time to figure it out, but it doesn't matter, because all that matters is that she's going to get into office and she is going to vote and work on and support bills that are put in front of her by the people that helped get her there. That is the state of politics in the United States. This woman doesn't know what the hell the Patriot Act is. Guess what? She lost. Good. And I don't know if the dude that beat her is any better, but Dr. Barbara Bollier, you're fired. All right. I'm out of here. Thanks for hanging in there. We had 300 at the peak. We're at 264 now. And I'm ready to jump off for today. Thanks for being here. Jam-packed, a lot of information, last hour and 20 minutes. And I hope you share this with people that you like. Hit the like button. And, because there are things in here to really look at. We got a tarot reading, which I think really kind of covers where we are with the situation. We got historical kind of precedent with the United States chart. We're looking at voter irregularities. We're looking at how pro sports is promoting COVID and promoting the idea of contact tracing, perhaps getting us ready for the next wave. And finally, the complete and utter incompetence of our political caste and political system and the characters that play those roles. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to serve what's possible. Stay strong, right? Stay strong. And don't let the mind-forged manacles bring you down and enchain you. We were meant to be here. We were meant to be here to understand the notion of what it takes to be free, We were born here to understand the notion of what the concept and the reality and the practice of truth is. And these aren't always givens, and they're not always easy to ground and understand. But that's what we're here to do. That is the great work as far as I'm concerned. So take care of yourself, and I'll see you tomorrow with the Crimmies. Cheers.